Hello and welcome to Communication Connection. I'm your host, Terry Likes. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, if you work or live in SEC country, sports is a way of life. And our guest today has made sports a way of life for himself. Ross Dellenger joins us, a proud alumnus of the Department of Communication, and he's a senior writer for Sports Illustrated. Ross, thank you so much for joining us here on Communication Connection.
No problem. Great to be on.
Well, we're glad to have you. Now, I know that you learned early in life when a lot of classmates were thinking they'd like to play sports. You decided you wanted to report on sports. So you had an emphasis early on, a focus.
I did. My career, I guess, started on the sports side, not the writing side. So I wanted to play sports. And I grew up around sports. My dad was a high school football coach on the Mississippi and Louisiana Gulf Coast, and for 40 years. And I grew up around the locker room and on the team bus and on the sideline, and always was drawn to it. The problem was I was not very. I didn't have very good coordination. I wasn't necessarily fast. I couldn't catch, and I wasn't big enough to play like on the line. So. I wasn't going to play sports. That was pretty clear, or at least beyond high school. So I started dabbling in statistics, specifically football, kind of became enamored by stats and writing about games and covering games. And that's kind of how it all started.
Well, we see state diplomas behind you, and you've got cowbells back there, so we know that you ring true, so we're glad to see that. Now, you began your career here at Mississippi State. You graduated back in 2006, but in your time here, you worked at the Reflector, which is a long, historic, and award-winning student newspaper. I know that helped shape your career path as well.
It did. I certainly learned an incredible amount, right, by being kind of thrown into the fire and at the time we were 3 times a week. We produced a paper 3 days a week. So it was pretty wild, and it was busy, and it really prepared me for a career in newspapers, which I'm kind of no longer in, but I was in for, I don't know, 10 to 12 years in the newspaper business, and the Reflector prepared me an incredible amount. There's only so much I feel like you learn from the classroom when it comes to our industry. You can learn stuff from the classroom, and I did there. But to really get out doing it is what really what really prepares you kind of for the next step, and also assures that you want to do this. When you start actually doing it, instead of just learning about it in the classroom, when you actually start doing it and writing and reporting and sitting behind a computer and laying out pages, you find out if you like it or not, and if that's what you want to do.
Well, I know as someone who was a student media advisor for a decade at one point in my career, that working at a place like the Reflector helps you form bonds, almost like a fraternity, if you will, people that you've formed lifelong friendships with, I'm sure.
Yes. Martini Monday is what we had at the Reflector. We produced on Monday and for Tuesday's paper, and we all went out to the bar for Martini Monday, downtown Starkville at now it's no longer there, but it was Old Venice. It was the Burgundy Room at Old Venice Bar in downtown Starkville. I had Martini Monday. We always went there, and a group of us shared this bond, and we did the same thing Wednesday nights because we produced Wednesday for Thursday's publication, and Wednesday I think was like Whiskey Wednesday or something like that. So we all bonded in the production in the newsroom, and then we all went out together and had a good time off campus.
Well, tell us about your career trajectory. We know about the Reflector at the beginning. We know you're with Sports Illustrated now, but there had to be stops in between. How did you get to Sports Illustrated?
Yeah, it's a fairly a winding journey that I really took with my wife in the passenger seat, sometimes driving the car, so to speak. We both graduated in 2006 from Mississippi State, and she went to work for the Clarion Ledger in Jackson, and I followed her there to work for the Associated Press, and I was basically an intern, a news intern. And I'm telling you, all if you're you know, if you're a sports or somebody who wants to be a sports writer and you're watching this, I can promise you, you're going to want to do news first. That 9-month AP internship in Jackson taught me so much. It was basically just news. I did a little sports sprinkled in, but it was incredible. So after that, I actually left. I left Jackson. She stayed there, and I left and took my first sports writing job covering Auburn for a paper in Decatur, Alabama. And I was the Auburn, basically football, men's basketball, baseball beat writer for the Decatur Daily. I did that for 1 year and realized that I missed my now wife. So moved back to Jackson, Mississippi. Then started working for the Clarion Ledger where she was working, and did high school sports, and then moved up to cover Jackson State. And then both of us moved off to Missouri. She was got the job with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch covering the Missouri legislature, and I got a job covering Mizzou. It was a variety of Mizzou sports. I covered the university kind of as a whole, and that was for about 2 years. And I worked for the Columbia Tribune in Columbia, Missouri. And then after that, we went to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where we lived for about 6 years. We both worked for the Advocate newspaper down in Baton Rouge. Liz mostly did Louisiana legislature type stuff. She did some congressional stuff as well, and I covered LSU football in baseball for 5 years before got the call up to SI in April of 2018, or May of 2018. So this week marks my 4th year with SI. And then, of course, 3 years ago, we moved out of Baton Rouge, and we're in Washington, D.C. now. My wife is a reporter, kind of editor for The Hill, and I can kind of live wherever I want, so I work remote here for SI.
Well, wonderful. And you're part of a unique group where you actually met your spouse here at Mississippi State, or future spouse, and you both have had very successful careers. And like many, you've moved around a lot to get to that pinnacle of where you want to be. So tell us about what is it like to reach what many would consider the pinnacle in the sports journalism world, and that is Sports Illustrated. It must be similar to working in the minor leagues in baseball and finally making it to the Yankees.
Yeah, like I said, it was kind of like a call up. I'll be honest, I never really aspired to be a national reporter, a national writer in my field of college football. I never really thought it was attainable. And part of that was because of the way the industry was going, and a lot of big national jobs were kind of drying up. I mean, just probably 10 years ago, maybe, and of course 20 years ago, there were probably 50 to 100 full-time national college football writers. Now we're down to like 15, probably 15 to 20, if I had to guess, regularly, daily covering national college football. So it's a small group, and I never really aspired to be it. I didn't really know if I wanted to do that, to cover the whole nation. It just seemed so big. Like there's no way I could do that. And it took time. My first year was kind of rough with SI, and it just kind of, it's such a big piece of the pie. I'd only covered a little small school and covered the SEC, branched out from that small school and covered some SEC stuff. When I covered Mizzou and LSU, I was doing a lot of SEC as well, but it was all regional. Wasn't doing a lot of national stuff. And it kind of scared me, but I've kind of fell into the groove a little bit. And honestly, there's two things that happened in my early career at SI that I think kind of made my mark in a way. LSU, the team I'd covered for so long, and where I have a lot of great sourcing down there, won the national title my first full year with SI in 2019. That helped. And then, as crazy as this sounds, COVID helped. I think COVID required sports writers to write news, to interview doctors and lawyers rather than coaches and players more. And a lot of sports writers, a lot of people, especially on the national level, either didn't want to do that or couldn't do that. and I just kind of jumped in and did it, and it was able to break a lot of news on COVID and sports, and then I traveled during the fall of 2020. I traveled actually quite a bit. You know, if I was 55 instead of 35, I probably wouldn't have done that. But a lot of writers either didn't travel, and I certainly understand that in the middle of a pandemic, or they weren't allowed to. Their company didn't allow them to. So those things kind of have helped me feel, you know, kind of comfortable now in this role with SI.
Well, we've had some big changes in the sports world in recent years. The issues pertaining to name, image, and likeness. The transfer portal has certainly changed things among college athletics. And closer to home, soon we're going to have Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC. So that is going to have a big impact on your alma mater. I'm sure you'll be watching that closely. But these are all big issues in the world of sports right now.
They are, and I've kind of really it started kind of with the COVID stuff. I've kind of become a sports business writer. Sometimes I feel like I'm no longer doing as much of the feature writing or even the game coverage or the picks or the rankings. It's almost because there's so many impactful issues in college football and college sports right now, and it's changing so rapidly that I've really become like a sports business writer, and I don't mind that. And it's kind of going from one issue to the other. As I mentioned, COVID. And then we kind of moved into NIL, as you mentioned, the name, image, and likeness stuff. And then we've got, you know, we had college football playoff expansion stuff and all that still going on, athletes' rights stuff. And then we kind of moved into, you mentioned it, conference realignment, right? And then NCAA transformation. Where is the NCAA going? Where is FBS football going? Is there a split? So we have all these issues. And I've kind of like just grabbed onto it. And I think it's probably because of my news background. A lot of national college sports writers just haven't done a lot of that. You know, I think there's a lot of still wanting to write about player X and coach X and team X. And I think these issues are so significant that I've decided to dive into them and like I said, kind of almost become a sports business type of writer these days, and so it's been interesting, and we're definitely right in the middle of a very big time of change in college athletics.
Well, Ross, we appreciate you keeping an eye on all of that for us. I know that recently you were back on campus. You and Elizabeth were here as part of the Journalism Advisory Board. So we thank you for your service and for coming back to campus and for meeting with students and faculty and for giving back to your alma mater. So we wish you and Elizabeth all the continued success, and we'll be watching your career. And thank you so much for joining us here on Communication Connection.
Thanks for having me.
And we appreciate you watching us here on Communication Connection. Stay tuned, and we hope that you will join us next time. I'm Terry Likes. Thanks for watching.